Jamie Fuller is the chairman of the sports company Skins and a sports ethics campaign, and the founder too of the Change Cycling Now campaign, which called for a shift in the way anti-doping in the sport is managed. He joins us now from Sydney. Jamie, thanks very much for joining us. These new revelations in international athletics really seems to indicate another sport with a very ingrained culture.
Yes, Bev, this is what we're dealing with here. What we're facing is nothing new, frankly. We can go back 27 years ago to Ben Johnson's race in Seoul Olympics in 1988. And what we all thought at the time was a lone instance of a Seoul doper was subsequently proven to not be the case. What we ended up seeing in that race was, of the 8 people that started that 100 metres, 6 of them have been associated with doping. And whilst cycling has faced the most public scrutiny previously in the past with respect to doping in sport, what we're also dealing with in athletics is a culture of doping that goes back quite some time.
And as we found in cycling, where you really saw the governing body trying to manage it, they were worried because the sport was growing, they didn't want to damage the sport, they kind of covered it up. Do you think similar things have been happening in athletics?
Yes, I do. And it's disappointing to hear Lord Coe, Sebastian Coe is running for president of the IAAF, the global governing body for athletics. And that vote's on in 2 weeks' time. And he was quoted only yesterday talking about the amount of money that the IAAF spends on doping as a percentage of their total revenue. And he was claiming that the IAAF spends more money as a percentage of revenue than any of the other federations. And it's disappointing because the issue that we're facing at the moment is not an issue with respect to investigation or with respect to testing and spending money. What we're talking about here is having the doping and having the information, but not having any sort of transparent process that enables this information to come out when it should have come out. And it's only come out now because of a whistleblower. So it's a bit like the problem of alcoholism. The first step to recovery is to acknowledge the fact that you're an alcoholic, and it's the same story here with doping. And the first step to coming up with a solution is not to try and eradicate the scandal, but you've got to admit that you have a problem to start with in order to eradicate the doping.
And the disappointing, some of those quotes that we saw suggest that maybe the 2 biggest countries, Russia and Kenya, are nowhere near ready to admit that they've got a problem.
No, and frankly, it's probably at a point where, you know, one could question whether they need to be excluded from international competition until things are proven to be right. And
do you think international authorities would do that?
No, I don't. I'm afraid it's a little bit too cynical for that. And I think the problem is that we're dealing with, again, a family. It's a bit like, you know, we know what the FIFA family, the FIFA football family is like. We're dealing with a sports governance family who are more focused on eradicating scandal as opposed to eradicating problems.
What about WADA, its capacity, and also the fact that, as we saw in cycling, the cheaters seem to stay one step ahead of the testers?
Yeah, and look, when I tell you that the WADA budget, the global budget for WADA is only $27 million a year. And put that in context, that's half of LeBron James' salary of one basketball player. It's half of his salary to cover an agency that has to deal with, not with all the testing, but they have to coordinate and they have to be responsible and accountable for global testing. And we went out 2 years ago and championed a raising of their budget because we said it's ridiculous that they've got to do what they do on $27 million. And when you look at that $27 million in the context of the size of the business of sport globally, it's something like $800 billion. 27 million is a drop in the ocean, and I think it indicates the level of seriousness or lack thereof that we face when we're trying to get rid of doping.
And it sort of is quite disillusioning as sports lovers, all of us, to think, well, how do we take this seriously into the future?
Yeah, and bluntly, Bev, I mean, doping is only one part. There's actually a bigger conversation around the integrity of sport. We know what we believe sport stands for, and by we I mean the majority of the public, and the role that sport plays in society and the power of good that sport can do. I mean, you've only just got to look at the last weekend in Australia and the role that sport has played in the Adam Goods factor with a major social issue of racism in society, and the positive power that it can bring to understand what sport truly means. And if you look at that in the global context and in the social context, it's really important. And we're facing a crisis in confidence that the public has in sport, whether it's to do with match fixing, whether it's to do with doping, whether it's to do with corruption in administration and governance. There's a whole plethora of issues that need to be resolved. And we are facing a number of individuals and a number of federations that are really not coming to this debate with the right intent. And that's what we've been pushing for, is to make sure that we start off at the very top with the best intent.
Jamie Fuller, really good to talk. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bev.